it has the potential to reshape the midterms. President Trump's Texas power play. With a limited number of competitive House seats, Trump is trying to expand the map. But rather than waiting for the beginning of a decade to redraw House district lines, he wants it done in Texas now to give the GOP a chance at picking up 5 new seats and to help cement a GOP majority for the rest of his second term. So what will Democrats do? My colleague Sarah Ferris and I have new reporting out this morning on how Democrats are plotting, eyeing 5 blue states to redraw maps of their own and flip GOP seats. And so this week, I spoke with House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries about the trench warfare.
House Republicans have been a complete and total failure for the American people. They have no credible track record of success. That's why House Republicans are afraid of the voters in 2026 in the midterm elections, and they're trying to cheat to win.
Cheat to win. I mean, but this is what majorities do. They redraw lines.
It is completely and totally unprecedented to engage in mid-decade redistricting. That is only being done because House Republicans in Texas and beyond know they have no track record of success. The lines for Texas have already been drawn, and in fact, they are already heavily gerrymandered. They have been ordered by Donald Trump, who is their political puppet master, to try to do everything possible to avoid a free and fair election. That's what this is all about in Texas. But we believe it may actually backfire, and that they may draw lines that endanger their Republican incumbents.
So it sounds like you think you can get back in the majority, even if they succeed in Texas.
We are going to be successful regardless of what they do in Texas. But the principle of free and fair elections is one that we should fight for. And these Republicans are trying to disenfranchise millions of voters in Texas as part of a scheme to rig the midterm elections.
Now, we know that there's talk now among Democrats of responding in kind, including in California. Up to 5 seats, we are hearing about this. Are you supportive of this effort in California, changing lines in California to respond to what's going on in Texas?
I'm going to let the governor of California speak for himself and the people of California, as well as the leaders of the California delegation. But in my view, all options are on the table in terms of making sure that there are fair maps throughout the country. The people of Texas are at risk of not having fair maps. We have a responsibility of making sure that we look at every single state of the union and do what we can to ensure that we maximize fairness in those jurisdictions.
Wouldn't that be a risk, though, in California, because you have to go through a ballot initiative to change the law? Is that a risk if Democrats go down that route?
That's an open question, and it's my understanding that some of the best and brightest lawyers in the country are looking at every single aspect of what's possible in these states throughout America.
In New York, I've talked to some members of your delegation, Democrats who want New York to change the maps, to try to add seats, Democratic seats in New York. Would you support that effort in your state?
Let me just simply say the maps in New York are not as fair as they could be.
That sounds to me like you're open to changing it before.
I look forward to having a conversation with the governor about how do we ensure that New York maps are as fair as possible in an environment where you've got extreme MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump doing everything they can to undermine the will of the voters and undermine the principle of free and fair elections across the country.
Have you talked to the governor yet about changing the maps before the midterms?
I speak to the governor regularly, and at some point I look forward to sitting down with her sooner rather than later once we hit the August district work period.
You just accused Republicans of rigging the election by changing the lines in the middle of the decade. Wouldn't Democrats be doing the same thing?
It's important to understand that in Texas, there's already ongoing litigation that the map that currently exists violates the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That's litigation that we think we're on the verge of winning. What we're committed to doing as Democrats in New York, in California, in New Jersey, across the country, is make sure that the congressional maps are as fair as possible.
Is New Jersey another option that you're looking at too?
I think that if you have a situation where Republicans are unleashing every malignant scheme possible to try to undermine the principle of free and fair elections, and to disenfranchise millions of people in Texas and beyond, that it's incumbent upon all of us to take a close look at how do we ensure that the congressional map writ large is as fair as possible in advance of the midterm election.
But you don't think this is the same thing as what the Republicans are doing
Of course
in Texas?
it's not.
Because of why?
Because we believe in the principle of fair maps. Understand something, Manu, that Republicans wouldn't even be in the majority right now if it wasn't for Republicans in the North Carolina legislature last year stealing 3 congressional seats from the people of North Carolina.
All right, my panel is back. So some news there. He plans to talk to the governor of New York over the August work period to recess to try to figure out if they could change the lines to help Democrats. Right. New Jersey's clearly on their minds. We're hearing about other states as well, Minnesota, Washington State, all these states. This is a huge risk, though, for the Democrats, because the same problem could exist for the Republicans in Texas. They change the lines, it makes their cities more vulnerable for in the general election. Maybe if they go down the route the Democrats do, they could put their seats at risk.
But if you feel it's going to be a good 2026 for you, it's less of a risk for Democrats if Trump's in the White House. I do think we're a long way from this. California, to get past Proposition 20, which they passed in 2010, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be difficult. Costly, a lot of money. I think they could do this. The bare knuckle, what it says to me is Republicans are completely worried about losing the House. Trump is worried about it personally. He's worried about impeachment. He's worried about investigations, and that he will go to any step to try and do this. Because I covered the 2004 Texas thing when these guys fled the state to try to get the bare knuckle, the raw politics of this is just brutal.
It really is brutal. And I asked the speaker about Hakeem Jeffries' comment. This is what Mike Johnson said about them rigging the election. He said it's ridiculous. Hakeem Jeffries is also playing political games. He went on to say he's struggling right now to decide whether or not he's going to support the Marxists for mayor in New York City. So he's looking for distractions.
Very subtle segue.
Yeah, it's something that he does not want to talk about.
Gentle pivot to something else. It was really interesting. Your interview with Leader Jeffries was so interesting because there's quite a bit of political jujitsu around the relativism of the ethics about if Republicans do it or Democrats do it. But I heard a couple of this also wasn't subtle. I heard a couple of words over and over again. One was fairness, the idea of fairness. But the other is one thing he said that just is indisputable is you try to do a mid-census redistricting, the Republican Party does, that is a really big deal.
It's a Pandora's box.
And
right, exactly.
it bakes in the assumption that it will be litigated and that the Supreme Court will be on your side. It bakes in the assumption that you do whatever you have to do to get over the finish line in the midterms. For people who are democracy watchers, who care about sort of the long-term health of U.S. democracy, these kind of, extraordinary moves are troubling long-term, whichever party pursues them.
Did it in New York, though. Jeffries was part of it in New York last cycle, so they both do it.
Yeah. All right, we're going to have more to discuss on that.